Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Brian Sonnenstein. I am one of the co-founders of Shadowproof.com, joined by my wonderful colleague, Kevin Gosztola here today. Kevin, good to be with you. Why don't you take us directly into a very exciting morning, or what seemed like a very exciting morning from your tweets? What happened today?
Yeah, no, in my view, I think that the defense had strong witnesses that they put on the stand, the proverbial stand, and none of them were physically in the court. Both appeared by video, but they had Trevor Tim, who is actually somebody that I know. In fact, our work on WikiLeaks and Chelsea Manning mostly began at around the same time. I remember meeting him when I was an intern at The Nation magazine and was familiar that he was finishing up his time at a law school. So he's a good and credible person, strong understanding of these issues, and very strong advocate for freedom of the press. He's the executive editor for the Freedom of the Press Foundation. In fact, their organization is, as he talked about, responsible for developing the Secure Drop system, which is an open source whistleblower submissions system that allows for journalists to be able to ask whistleblowers or sources to provide documents and give them some kind of confidentiality or hopefully protect their anonymity, maybe shield them from potential prosecutions or retaliation by agencies. And so he, of course, is someone who is quite well suited to talk about these issues in court. The other witness was Paul Rogers, who's a peace studies professor, and he was brought on the stand to talk about Julian Assange's political opinions and how the fact is that this case is being pursued against Assange because of certain views that he has against government, but now particularly President Donald Trump's administration. And so, there's a few highlights that I'd share from the day, as is the case for my reporting. You can go find the thread on Twitter at Gosztola for a full rundown of what happened with both of the witnesses. But what really stands out to me, and you may have some kind of reaction or comment, Brian, which is that the prosecutors has done this thing now 2 days in a row where they're basically referencing indictments and statements from the assistant U.S. attorney Gordon Kromberg from the Eastern District of Virginia and acting like that's evidence of fact, that like that is proof that Julian Assange committed these crimes. And so any of the defense witnesses taking the stand that do not include those statements from Kromberg or the indictment in their witness testimony are in fact biased witnesses because they're not considering these government talking points. I've followed this stuff rather closely. I've never seen anything like it. I'm not really sure why this is being allowed to happen in these cases. I flat out don't understand why this is what is going on. But Trevor Tim handled it pretty well in what was being done. And so I give him a lot of credit because yesterday on day two, Mark Feldstein, when asked aggressively about the indictment and some of these particular affidavits, he just would concede points because that was not really something that was a part of his expertise. But then, Trevor, on the other hand, is very well aware of what the tactics are of the Justice Department in pursuing leakers and the ways in which they're trying to criminalize journalists. And so he himself spoke about this in great detail and rebutted what the government was trying to do, what the Crown Prosecution Authority representative for the U.S. government was trying to accomplish. And I think frustrated him a lot. In fact, at the end, he had an outburst, really kind of blew up on the judge because the time that he had for an hour ran out, and the defense noted that to the judge, and the judge said, yes, yeah, your time is up. And he was very irate that he was being told to stop his cross-examination of the witness.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was wondering, if you wanted to touch at all on the issue of, and I don't know if this is what you were referring to earlier, but I saw that you mentioned that, uh, the witnesses were being given these huge caches of documents and given almost no time to review them, and then asked questions about them. Is that right? Can you talk about that a little bit? I might have botched that.
Yeah, no, that's something that's rather interesting because the prosecution has these massive 350-page bundles, or I'm sure it varies, but we're talking hundreds of pages of material that are being dropped in the laps of witnesses, and they're asked to basically know the material so that they can speak on it when they are cross-examined by the prosecutor. And Trevor said, I got this about 24 hours ago. So I really don't know every detail that you're talking about. I've had a chance maybe to skim, but I don't quite know what it is. And, the prosecutor tried to pass this off as the fault of the defense because the defense is forwarding on the prosecution bundle to him. But, the thing is that, like, if the defense is passing it on, then they have to have it from the prosecutors. And it's Trevor's understanding that the reason why the defense isn't providing this material timely manner is because the prosecutor's not passing it on to the defense in a timely manner. So they're giving it to these witnesses, and it's pretty clear that what they don't want is witnesses or the defense to have time to prepare a rebuttal to what the prosecution is going to present. So they're giving a very limited amount of time to the witness, but then it's really impossible for them to go along with what the prosecutor is trying to show, and they can be lost, not quite sure what the prosecutor is even getting at through their efforts to elicit testimony. And one thing that I know that you were able to see that has caught my attention is that we are now invoking the federal rules of prosecution as evidence that attorneys and prosecutors and career bureaucrats are not engaged in some kind of case that is political against Julian Assange. And I thought Trevor answered it very appropriately, where he said, well, in theory, yeah, that's correct. That would tell you that that's what they're supposed to do, is not pursue cases for political reasons. But, in practice, that's far different. And actually, I think that was Paul Rogers' answer, which I haven't gotten to him yet, but we will.
Right.
But then what Trevor did was he engaged it flat on, and was asked, okay, so if you're suggesting this is a war on journalism and these people this was something Lewis asked. I was kind of stunned that he entertained this, but it was, if this is a war on journalism, then aren't these people at the Justice Department breaching their obligations as officials or as employees? And Trevor was like, yeah, and I would hope that there would be some kind of investigation into what they are doing, because this is inherently corrupt and we should do something about it so they're not prosecuting another case like this against people who are like Julian Assange. So yeah, I don't understand really. I guess I kind of do, but there's a lot going on here with the prosecutor that I hope to write and flesh out. I'm not sure if I want to do it just yet. It may be premature to lay this out because there are other witnesses still to come that I expect are going to have similar kinds of testimony that will mean that the prosecutor is going to ask the same set of questions again. Mm-hmm. So it may be worth it to see how this continues to repeat, or if it varies and how it varies. There's an argument for just reporting very intensely what has happened already in this past day, but there's another argument that says there's a pattern developing here with this prosecutor, and it might help better our understanding of the case if we look at it all together in one single piece. And what I'm getting to is that they seem to not want to admit this fact that Barack Obama's administration did not prosecute Julian Assange. Mm-hmm. Like, that is a fact. It didn't happen. There was no indictment of Julian Assange. So whether the investigation was ongoing or not, as they continue to reference that the grand jury did not dissolve, it was still in existence. It was available for Trump to fire up and charge Julian Assange. But the fact is that they could have at any time indicted Julian Assange. And then we got this really absurd thing that came up with Paul Rogers, where he said that he was asked, why would they have gone and bothered to arrest Julian Assange when he was in the embassy and they could not get to him? And I agree with Paul Rogers' reaction, which is that doesn't seem to be the criteria for the Justice Department in charging people in any prior cases that I can come up with. The fact that they're not available for an arrest doesn't necessarily stop an indictment. Edward Snowden was in Hong Kong is an immediate example that comes to my mind. And he was in Hong Kong, and they still issued an indictment against him under the Espionage Act. And, they're still pursuing charges against him, even though he's in Russia and has claimed asylum and is entirely out of reach of the U.S. government. But that doesn't mean that they've abandoned their prosecution because they can't get to him. And then again, they also we've seen indictments against alleged Russian intelligence agents who were accused of hacking and interfering in the 2016 election, and none of those people can be gotten to. It's not like the U.S. government's ever going to be able to arrest them, but that was an attempt that was made by the Justice Department to pursue those cases. I think it's largely failed at this point in time, but this idea that this explains why the Obama administration didn't pursue it. And it's not because of the hurdles of the First Amendment. I mean, this guy, James Lewis, keeps butting his head against this fact that the First Amendment exists. The Obama administration recognized it as a hurdle, and they backed away. And that is something that you can tell is they're really trying to get around, find a way to deal with and manage, and they still haven't quite figured it out. They almost have to deny reality, and that's why a lot of the lines of questioning in the last 2 days, on day 2 and day 3, have seemed to occupy some parallel universe in which we're expected to act like Obama was as aggressive against Assange as the Trump administration, when we just don't have any evidence for that, particularly because there was no indictment from Obama, but there is an indictment from Trump. I mean, I don't know how else to get people to realize that there's a difference here, or I don't know what it's going to take for the prosecutors to give this up, because it's just so clear. It should be so clear.
Yeah, you started talking a little bit about Rogers' testimony in the morning. Did you have more that you wanted to share on the morning's testimony?
Well, just to say that this issue of political opinions is one that can play into whether he would be protected from extradition. And so he's one of the first witnesses that have been brought to the proverbial witness stand to flesh out that, here are his principles, here are his values. He's somebody who cares a lot about transparency. He speaks a lot about government accountability. He puts this into action through his work as the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, and that in effect, he has these libertarian views, but they aren't just isolated to government. He also sees corporations and trade unions and NGOs as somehow being part of transnational governance, and that governance and its secrecy should be challenged widely, that there's certain information that should be made available to the public. And so in advancing these principles and living up to these values, he has clashed with governments, and he is in the crosshairs with the Trump administration because he has these values, and he's been effective in challenging these governmental administrations. And so the connection was also made that there's been a shift in the politics in the government from Obama to Trump, to an administration that cannot find its way to tolerating Assange and other people, that cannot tolerate adversarial journalism, and in fact has treated journalists like enemies of the people. And he made this point that he believes that Trump the administration can't allow someone like Assange to continue to exist because they see journalists as a threat to what they are trying to do in their administration. But it was also a connection that was made. There was a connection that Paul Rogers tried to make to the commutation of Chelsea Manning and suggesting that perhaps there were, I mean, I'm gonna extend the point that I think he was trying to make, because he didn't actually say this, but I think it's fair to say that he was getting at the people at the Justice Department who maybe weren't supportive of Obama giving Chelsea Manning a commutation could find their way to backing this prosecution against Julian Assange to re-up and reinforce the government position that what happened in this was not whistleblowing, and also to reinforce the belief that the WikiLeaks publications were not responsible journalism. And so that this might be kind of a reaction to the commutation that Chelsea Manning was able to get from Barack Obama before he left office.
Was there anything else from today's proceedings that you wanted to run down, or would you like to talk about what you expect to see tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we could wrap here. Tomorrow, we are going to have a witness who I'm not familiar with, but his name is Eric Lewis. He's apparently put together multiple reports for the proceedings. And I guess if you want to know what bizarre prosecutor line of questioning lies ahead, this prosecutor said to the judge today that he's going to need like all of the afternoon with this witness, which seems rather absurd to me. But he also has been referring to something that was written around a kind of theory that this person has about how Trump arrived at bringing this prosecution. And so I think that this is going to be one that I'm going to rather enjoy following tomorrow, just because there's going to be a lot of tension and conflict between the prosecutor and this witness. So you have that to look forward to for day 4 of the extradition hearing. And so I'll thank you. I'll thank everyone for following these proceedings. I'll just give a little housekeeping note for people who have been following my work, which is to say that today I did something a little bit different than I had been doing on day 1 and day 2, sort of to conserve energy and to be more efficient in my coverage. I focused on doing a transcript while court was in session, and when there were times when I thought that the prosecutor had veered into questions that were repetitive and times that there were breaks, I was tweeting and catching people up on what had happened during the proceedings. There wasn't anything wrong with my Twitter account. There's no issues with my computer. I'm quite all right, but I just felt that it would be best and that I would be able to put out the best coverage of the case if I did it that way, and that it wouldn't be as tiring, because trying to hear, follow, and also send tweets while I'm getting the testimony from these witnesses, it allows me to better engage and digest what is being said in that courtroom. So just to know that like there's nothing really wrong, and that I haven't given up doing live coverage. I'm still trying to get people updates on what's happening as soon as possible. And then certainly there's other journalists who are going to tweet snippets throughout and maybe not do it exactly this way. So if you want to follow them, that's fine. Just know why stuff isn't coming immediately. It's because I'm focused on getting a transcript for tweeting, and then also for future reports that are going to be posted at shadowproof.com. So thank you to everyone who has supported this work. I really appreciate it. There's the Dissenter newsletter. We're sending out these reports at dissenter.substack.com every day. So you can sign up to an email list. I think there's at least 5,000 or 6,000 people at this point that are getting this every day and have responded fairly well to it. But then at shadowproof.com, it'll be posted there. And you can go to shadowproof.com and donate if you'd like to support this work. And there's been people who have already given to me, and I thank you immensely for believing in the value of this journalism. And your support helps me to continue getting up before 4 a.m. and taking this on for the next 2.5 weeks. I'm not sure I can predict what is going to happen over the next 2.5 weeks. I don't know if all the witnesses on the list are actually going to be called, but I'm going to stick through it and do this until mostly the end of September. So there's a lot to come with the coverage of this extradition hearing.
Well, Kevin, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you for this valuable public service that you're doing. Definitely sign up for the Dissenter newsletter. There's a little widget, a little sign up box at shadowproof.com if you're looking for it, but it's dissenter.substack.com. Shadowproof.com/donate if you want to put a little coffee money, a little breakfast money in for Kevin so he can rest and kind of recuperate before tomorrow. And just wanted to say thanks. And make sure that you're following Kevin on Twitter where he's doing all of these updates at the crack of dawn. It's at Gosztola. You can see it right there below his face. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kevin. Get some rest, and we will talk tomorrow.